thing that I hadn't ever incorporated into my journey was forgiveness. And when I latched onto that and understood that I wasn't forgiving him, I was forgiving myself for everything. I was forgiving that I bought into him. I used forgiveness specifically for me, so I didn't have to carry those burdens that he put on me by cheating.
Welcome to Grief Uprooted, a podcast dedicated to sharing your grief stories. Together, we embark on the mystery of one's grief journey as they learn to live, heal, and be courageous in a world rooted in trauma. Join myself, Christine, in an open discussion to help you uproot the grief in all our lives. I am an award-winning author, professional speaker, and humanitarian in the field of grief and trauma. I want you to be part of the discussion. Welcome so much. I am very excited about this topic, but I'm going to be upfront, Nicole. I wonder how forgiveness and what a forgiveness expert and grief have in common. But before we start, I just would love for you to introduce to everybody tuning in today where you're tuning in from. I have your name right, Nicole Harvick.
That's it.
And what brought you to this career that we're going to explore in the next hour?
Oh boy, well, that is a big question, but I'm going to make it really small for you. But I have been an intuitive all my life. I was that kid that had seances in her playhouse when I was 9 and 10. So I've always had that aspect of me that was very available at any time. But what happened is I went through a very bad divorce. In 2013, I found out my husband was cheating on me. But the way I found out was even more devastating than the fact that he was. And I had a daughter. She was in 6th grade at the time, and she was actually in California staying with his parents because she was on break. And she called me and she says, "Mom," she says, and she's whispering, she says, "I think Dad has a girlfriend." Well, honey, why would you say that? I had no idea. And she said, well, she goes, "I'm getting pictures and a bunch of texts over my iPod Touch." I said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Can you send those to me?" Well, she did. And what had happened is her iPod Touch was synced with her dad's cell phone. So she was, and she was getting texts, sex, pictures, verbiage, you name it. And there's we're not innocent for that long, but you try to keep this rein on. You don't need to know everything in 6th grade. Yeah. But it was at that point she had to grow up really, really fast. And so when I found all that out, that really started me on this devastating journey of just sinking to my lowest, just becoming sick I was grieving, I was angry, and so many negative emotions flowing through my body that I thought I need help, because I started taking all these classes like Reiki, like cellular memory, meditation, hypnosis, you name it. And I wasn't getting better. And my hair had started falling out. I started scratching my skin until I bled. And as I was going through, why is this not helping me? It dawned on me the thing that I hadn't ever incorporated into my journey was forgiveness. And when I latched onto that and understood that I wasn't forgiving him, I was forgiving myself for everything. I was forgiving that I bought into him. I used forgiveness specifically for me, so I didn't have to carry those burdens that he put on me by cheating. Wow. So that was a very huge moment for me. And when I understood that, I started getting well. I'm not going to say it was overnight, but I started sitting up a bit straighter. I started taking better care of myself. And all of a sudden I realized, my gosh, if I can help myself in this way, I can help others, because there's a lot of people out there that really don't understand that forgiveness is just for them. And I always tell them it's actually very selfish, because you're not condoning what he did. You're using it for you to get all that negativity out of your body, away from you, so you can get rid of all the anger, hate, animosity. You can refill it with love, joy, and happiness.
You said so much there, so I'm gonna back you up. First off, where are you tuning in from?
Right now, I am in South Carolina. Ooh, nice. And I'm from California, then Arizona, and now in South Carolina.
Oh,
So
you've been to
I'm
all the
kind of,
hot places.
yeah, next, I think we'll see.
So, what I find so interesting is, and this is one of I'm speaking to you, the listener, right now, because this is why I love Grief Uprooted and I don't want to know people's grief stories beforehand. The reason being is I love to dive in them together. And I think when I'm preempted as to what's happening, obviously the conversation can't flow. It needs to flow because that's the way grief is. And it's not always in a pretty box. It's going to go whatever direction it wants to go. But what I find interesting about your story is you started with the intuitiveness. This was you as a child. And it sounds like, marriage starts to happen and we leave it. Been doing a lot of work with trauma experts. I had one on just the other day, and she started talking about working from the bottom up. And I was like, what the heck is she talking about? And then another lady had started talking about our gut and our heart has a brain. And this is
Yes,
when I'm like, okay, that's starting to get a message here. And exactly hearing you that here's this devastating thing that happened to you. Perhaps someone didn't die, but your marriage did. Your
my
dream did.
marriage did.
And where,
And die a little bit inside. That person I had resonated with, mother, because you put yourself in a box. I was no longer that person.
good
So
point.
that portion of me did die.
Yeah, good point. And I think it's so hard especially in that scenario that you placed it in, because I was trying to go, well, how do you forgive somebody if, your child? How do you forgive somebody if they accidentally on the surgical table, your loved one died? And then again, how do you forgive somebody who has an affair on you and you had this whole future planned out? And then
Hmm.
how do you forgive them because your 6-year-old child saw this, the elements to that. So I'd love to know. So when you started to dive into Reiki and all these other things, did you ever think about going to counseling or did you try that? Like,
I tried that. And that's what's so interesting is I spent so much money on counseling, to psychiatrists. I went to women's groups. I went just desperate to try anything. So I went and found. And a lot of times, what I realized I was doing is I was retelling the story
mm,
over and over and over. And, group, there can be a lot of angry women and animosity. And see, I was tired of the anger. The anger was me. The anger was making me sick. And so I had to back out of that. And then, counselors, you're just kind of, and they're giving you some suggestions, but it for me, it wasn't not helpful at all. And when I found forgiveness and started understanding it, and then the forgiveness that I used was an ancient Hawaiian traditional forgiveness of ho'oponopono, which means to make right. I that really what was holding me back is forgiveness. And a lot of it, I had to forgive myself for a lot of things because in my marriage, I never used my voice to protect myself.
yeah.
He was a narcissist and two girls and I did, oh well, I can't let him see me fight. Well, I can't, do this or say this because this will cause him to go off on a tirade or not speak to the family for a week.
Yeah, I got to pull you back because the I hear so much from my clients, and I love counseling and I love psychotherapists. I love them all, and they really serve a purpose of being allowing us to ruminate our story. And
Hmm.
so many times, if people come in and they're still ruminating that story, I'll say, go see or somebody within that frame because you need to get the story out. So I feel the purpose. Sometimes they feel like I've told the story, but nothing is changing. And that's where I think with grief, everybody has a different path. And it depends on the therapist you get. Some are starting to
True.
integrate this now, where they're going, okay, once the person's done ruminating the story over and over again, they want tangible things. They want to know how the hell do I get out of bed in the morning and how do I function? So I think that's where a real disconnect, but the world is starting to look at grief a little bit different and go, okay, it's like coaching, just like you want to learn how to play a piano or you want to drive a car. Somebody teaches you. It's like giving birth. they hand you a child and they say, well, here, take it. And you're like, all I got is what my mom did. And what if my mom wasn't right? Right. Like, so there's nobody shares how to that path. And it's like you kind of in this, but so you first did Reiki, then what came
Mhm.
next before this? I can't even say it. Hope,
Well, I'll tell you, I've given the gift of Ho'opono
hope.
because I took a family trip with my daughters to the Big Island of Hawaii in 2014.
Nice.
I found out my husband was cheating in 2013. And on this trip, I told me now, remember, I've been intuitive like forever. My guides told me when I went on this trip to feed the stray. And
Mm.
so I went over there thinking the stray was a dog because my older daughter and I, if we see a dog, we're going to stop, we're going to find it a home or at least find the owner. But I kept thinking, okay, it's a dog. So I carried, treats around with me and nothing resonated with me. So one day my older daughter and I went on the hike of the Kilauea volcano, which was active at the time. And it was a half a day hike. So we had all our water, we had all our food. And as I was crossing this to get to the other side, it was just a rickety old wooden bridge with rope handles. And I heard my guide say, make an offering to the island. So I had our sandwiches. I threw half a sandwich into a big ravine. And then as I got to the other side, I could hear something rustle in the foliage. And I looked and I could see this little bird. And my daughter crouched down and it had a hobbled foot. And so it was like hopping on three legs, but she fed it out of her hand. It was starving. So
Mm.
she actually fed the bird. And I heard my guide say, you found your stray. That was my stray. It was a bird. And when we got back from that trip, I saw that word ho'oponopono everywhere. Had no idea what it was. I had no idea what it meant. And then I started researching that ho'oponopono. What is this? And as it turns out, if you know Hawaiian families, which I do because I lived there for a while, island life is very different from like being
I've
California.
been there.
They
I
it's just
absolutely loved it.
it's amazing, isn't it? And what they do is the minute there's a rift in the family or someone's not getting along, they call everybody in and reconciliation. We're not going to let this anger go on. We're going to talk about it. We're going to get it out. We're going to forgive ourselves. We're going to forgive everyone. And it consists of four phrases. It's, I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And thank you. And
Yeah.
it's for you, yourself. You forgive yourself for hurting people. You thank people for what they've done for you. And I to myself, I've spent so much money on certificates, so much money on psychologists, psychiatrists. You could think of books, which I learned from everything, but I still wasn't there. But when I kept thinking it's not going to work, it's free. But my guide said, try it, just try it. And so what I started doing is saying it every night before I fell asleep so I could get it into my subconscious. And every morning as I woke up, so I could get it into my subconscious. And I'm going to say within a couple of weeks, I just different. I
Mm.
felt lighter, I guess would be the only way to describe it because burdens like that are so heavy, weigh you down.
Take
And
me
all of a
back.
sudden, just
Yeah,
anger melting
I'm
away.
gonna
It was amazing.
I'm fascinated, absolutely fascinated, because I before you tell me the words to say again, take me back to the marriage, because so many times when we talk about grief, we are stuck within the realm of this is, I'm still alive, I'm lucky I have two children, everybody's healthy, and then we look at, well, no one's dead. But when you're talking about a narcissistic person and living in that marriage, you know, just give me an idea of what that was, being that you figured the narcissistic after. Um,
After.
a lot of times I listen to another podcast and always calls it it's self-serving or uses a different word because he's not a therapist, nor are neither are I. But I'm counseling and work in this field, and it's really self-service behavior. It's just being extremely selfish. I know that everybody falls on this spectrum at some point, but what were some of the behaviors that you were before the affair that you were tackling?
Well, some of the things I could never do anything right. And I mean nothing. And to give you an example, my girls, I go out and buy them new clothes. And he'd say, "Oh, every day is Christmas at our house." But then if he'd see them in the same outfit a few times, he would say, "Oh, would you please go buy my orphans some new clothes?"
Mm.
To know when you're
Yeah.
if you do, you're doomed if you don't.
Yeah.
I remember him looking at me one time and saying, and untrained because I didn't have a certificate from a college.
Hmm.
And I told him, I said, I want you to know that really hurt my feelings. He says, "It's true." I
Mm.
mean, very cold. And, and as I threw him a surprise 50th birthday party, and I was away while I put it all together. I was with my daughter. She was in a pageant that weekend. And I arranged for food, I arranged for everything. And when I got home, I had him go get something so the people could come over. And we probably had 20, 25 people in there willing to celebrate him. And I could tell he was angry. I could tell he was just, whatever it was so angry. And the next day he looked at me and he says, "Look at this corner. It's where I had like all my and I had
Yeah.
this little wicker that I would stick." You didn't even bother to clean that.
Hmm.
Disregarded all the work for the actual party, not pointing out what I did do and thanking me, but point out that little tiny thing that I didn't do.
And you being
And
an
it,
empath, that is
oh,
usually what happens. You are attracted to these type of people. And I think sometimes people misunderstand when they're emotional and there's a little different in society where it's like you're emotional, you don't know how to get through your emotions or and that empathetic part of you wants to care for somebody, wants to take care of them. So when you meet somebody who's not very emotional, that doesn't express their emotion, often misunderstanding in the brain where they go, that person it must be more stable, where it's actually quite untrue. How people handle their grief because grief starts when you're born, your first step towards death. And it's like you can bottle it and look at it in a different way, or you can feel it and work yourself integrating through it. So, and be at different points in your life. So I find that fascinating that you're there, and then ultimately he pulled the fun narcissistic jerk move and had an affair. And being able. So how would you apply? So tell me the first one of Ho'oponopono. I think I got it right.
yeah,
What was the first one?
Ho'oponopono.
What was the first the four of the four things that you're supposed to do? They pull everybody to you.
I always start with "I love you" because love is the highest vibration. That vibrates at about 500.
Mm.
And I just started saying that to myself. And, funny because I didn't even know we could love ourselves.
Yeah.
Doesn't that's odd now to me, but
Yeah.
I thought, well, I love my kids, my siblings, my dog, and never thought about loving myself.
I can tell you,
And
majority of women and men do not love themselves. The immediately the first thoughts in their brain is, I'm too fat. I'm not educated enough. Failing at this. The kids are moving out. And I too found self-love. And I just started writing it in a journal. And at the end of my journal, I'd go, I love you. You did really good today. And I was
oh,
just like, wow, that now I've seen people where you're actually hugging yourself and saying,
I
I
love
love you.
that.
And I'm like, wow, this actually feels good. I feel weird doing it, but it feels good. So I
Right.
really think starting with I love you and even imagining the family dynamics. My grandmother, she was the mother of nine, and we always
Ooh,
joked because she would say, no one's fighting in this family. And she would go right to your house, figure out what was going on. So this really sounds very traditionally.
she knew it from somewhere.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
So you do that self-love, and then what was the next one?
I'm sorry. And me, I was sorry that coming from someone who was so independent before, because I got married older, I'd had jobs,
Oh,
everything.
yeah.
And I didn't stand up for myself.
Mm.
Reason, into consideration that, untrained and thought, why I? And I wanted to keep peace. A healer would want to keep peace. I'm sorry that I didn't stand up for myself.
Yeah, I get that. And I think in grief, you're sorry that you may not saw it. sometimes I think when we're grieving something like this, we think, how did I not see this? How did I
Right.
not, women's advocate, and I worked at Women's Place for so long that, would say, how did I not see this? And I think we so badly want that family unit. We want to keep things
Uh,
together. And women we're tape. We keep things
we
together.
are.
And
Yeah, it's amazing that we're so hard on ourselves
we
too.
are. And we have the ability to keep it together because we sacrifice ourselves.
Yeah.
And I know there are men out there the same way, and sacrifice in a different way sometimes, and it does cross over. I see it all the time, but yeah, it's kind of crazy. So what's the third one?
Please forgive me. And
Oh,
that's where forgiveness for me came in because
that's
I
a
had to
hard one.
forgive. That's a really hard one. It's always a hard one. And doing like literal work, looking at yourself, that you sometimes you don't even see who you are because you've gotten so mired in someone else's web of who you should be.
Yeah.
Forgive me for not standing up for myself,
Mm,
for letting him kind of he thought I should be and not allowing me, and I didn't stand up for myself, not allowing me to be my true authentic self.
yeah, that makes sense. And I think when it comes to grief, when I think about murder or an accident, we get wrapped up into that.
Hmm.
And you get wrapped up into the story and what happened, and you don't have to offer forgiveness to the other person. I know when somebody said that to me once, I said, "What?" They're like, "You don't have to forgive the other person, but you need to let it go. You need to
Release.
forgive
Yeah.
and say, there's nothing you can do with this, and let the story take a life of its own, let it go." And it's really trying to find that resolution to it all because it's sometimes we don't know the answers. We won't know why this happened. And
So true.
and often you go back to intuitively thinking about your loved one, and they would not want you walking this earth constantly wrapped in anger, constantly, especially when other members of the family start coming in, children get married, babies are born, even a new dog, at it going, they would have loved that. So it's a forgiveness of yourself and a forgiveness of the heavy grief you're carrying. But it doesn't mean you have to go forgive somebody who did something horrific. You may never, and you may never want to. Um, and where we become in service sometimes, where if our child or someone we love has been wronged, that forgiveness moves into service, where you see them fighting for new causes. You see them fighting so that other families don't experience this. Um, that's so amazing when you watch that, where people will say, I can't forgive. And I'm like, no, use that anger you feel. Forgive yourself for whatever thing you think you brought to the table, even though it was probably nothing, but then
Hmm.
use that of service so that that memory of your loved one lives forever and the world is changed for good.
Oh,
Uh,
that's beautiful.
it's a hard to do and a very touchy topic. Nobody wants to
Yeah.
go there. No one wants to talk because they're so
And
afraid of offending people. But, self-forgiveness, I think, on any level is extremely hard.
the things that really helped me, there's Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And one of the agreements is take nothing personally.
Mm,
And when I read that, just one particular chapter, take nothing personally, it made me to understand that whatever was going on inside of him was a reflection of me. It wasn't me per se, because I hadn't changed that much. But for some reason, whatever was going on within him made him dislike me a lot. And I realized I'm just me. I changed, of course, but I started thinking, well, I'm not going to take it personally. It's about him, not me, and I'm going to release it. I'm going to let it go. And for me was an epiphany as well.
definitely. So what's the last one?
Thank you. Look at this. I love that one because you can look at yourself and thank yourself for all the work you've just done to enhance your life.
Yes. And I think for this type of position that you're in, I think it's a rebirth for you. And you're thankful for that rebirth. And when I look at it in the context of someone dying, I'm thankful that I got that person. I'm thankful that I
Yeah,
lived that life with them. I'm thankful for the parents I have. And just being able to be thankful for everything you have. I can't imagine. I see a family together going through this process. What a beautiful thing to be able to go through this process and be able to look at each other and go, I'm thankful that you're here, and to do it while people are alive. Um,
absolutely.
and I think sometimes when we are using our brain over our gut and our heart, we will look at thankful and go, I'm not thankful for nothing. This is an awful, right? But at the
Yeah.
other side of that, if we were to use our heart and say, what are you thankful for? That experience with those people. Um, Fascinating, very fascinating. And grief story is one that, a lot of times we don't relate to grief. A lot of times we will say, you go to share that with other people. Sometimes I feel like, or maybe you can answer that question. Do you feel it's diminished because people are thinking, lose anybody? Your husband just did this.
For me, it knowing what he did and seeing him with my real eyes, realizing that that was more of who he was than what I thought. I was more sad for my that I let myself get so caught up
Mm,
in him that I forgot me. Does
yeah,
that make sense?
that does. You lose your
Yeah.
identity. Yeah.
You're about something that's very dear to me is my guides told me many, many ago there's two of us. The brain and the body are connected, but the mind of the consciousness and the soul are connected. And what they told me is the brain's just like a computer. It remembers, to show up today at 11. It remembers, I call so and so at noon. But the mind connects to everything. And it's so interesting that I tell people in this new earth, I mean, I've been counseling people, you have to think with your heart. So it's so interesting that you're bringing this up today
Oh, that's
because
interesting.
the is the new thought center.
Yeah. So you were just said, I just want to make sure I understood it right. Because you said the mind connects with everything. You mean connects with everything, and the mind tells you where to go, how to ride the bike. The mind.
No, the brain. The mind is connected to the universe, the consciousness.
Oh, got it. Okay. Oh,
Your physical, your mind is that one mind of the universe, and where all wisdom lies now is your mind and within your heart.
oh, fascinating. Okay, we'll take a quick break, and I want to come back and going to explore this a lot more.
We interrupt this podcast for a dirty moment.
My dirty moment is taking a few moments for myself to think about something that has angered me in the past and look at it from every angle and realize that I now understand myself enough to have the power to get that out of my body, away from me. And I bless it. I send it to wherever it wants to go with love, but I know it's not inside of me anymore.
I love where and thank you for sharing your grief story with me, and brought you to this point. But one of the things I know about and was you talk about you should never spiritually bypass your grief. And what does that exactly mean?
And I'm guilty of this because I lost my child was a full-term stillbirth.
Mhm.
And what I was doing is, say, well, God has her in a better place. Well, she must have had a bigger job, blah, blah. So what I was doing is I was accepting it spiritually, saying, okay, they're right, and to heal myself that way. But I don't feel that you can just sit with the grief for a
Mm,
while or forever. There's going to be a part of you that always feels that loss. And so, what I had to do is when I realized that wasn't helping me, I had to cry. I had to get angry, into a church. And I'm not a church person. And I was so angry, like, how you do this to me? You have to get out those emotions. You just can't go with, oh, well, that's what, so and so God wanted. It's like to sit with your grief in many different ways. And one of the ways with mine was anger.
yeah,
I was
that's
angry for a long time. And till, months after I lost this little girl. And the story is amazing of what happened after that. But had she been born, she would have had Down syndrome.
mhm.
And so she wouldn't have had, she had a very bad heart and just passed away in utero. But I
Oh,
was very angry.
I bet.
So I had to do my mirror work with anger
Mm,
and, that just the spiritual thing. This is a physical emotion I'm feeling. So
Yeah.
I couldn't spiritually bypass it. I had to work through it.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting because I think a lot of people think you can just bottle it and let go. And then it creeps up years later in your life. And thing an experience like that too, you seem to experience all the grief that people don't really want to recognize or talk about. Because
And that's the only way you can like understand how disruptive it will be if you don't release it.
yes, yes, I think but I also want to recognize that infant loss, miscarriage, and even divorce, these are forms of grief that people just kind of mull over. And what I mean by that is society, not the individual.
Mhm.
There's very hard to find a miscarriage or infant loss group. Because people always go, well, you can have another one, or you already have two. And you're like, wow, like it,
Not
yeah, and it's the same with divorce. It's become so normal in a sense, right? That, oh, we're sorry. People are having celebrations for divorces now. And, people are happy that they're out of the marriage, but you are grieving part of that. There is a grief
Mhm.
to that. And I think the anger takes you to let's have a celebration and plaster it all over Facebook, which is fine because you're becoming this new human. But it's really, there's a part of you that's grieving. And I think that's where you're saying the bypass of that grief will come back and it
Oh,
never
yes.
goes away. It's grief is integrated. It has always been my theory. It's never something that goes away, integrated into who we are, and we revisit it frequently. And it just kind of in and out. So
Right. When you think about your kids getting older, there was always that, oh, how cool is it going to be when they're on their own and they're married and you have grandchildren and going to transpire for me with a husband
yeah.
with that. It's just not.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so dang, that gone like that.
yeah. And the reason I'm giggling is because you think it's going to be so great, and then you get there and go, it's not so great. It's not as great as you think, right?
I
So
know.
I find
No.
I wake up in the morning going, where's everybody? Right? Because nobody's here anymore. But
I know.
it's these transitions through life are all things that we experience with grief. And this is why I love the four things you're presenting when, they're first with these four things and really, you know, that being thankful for what I have and being sorry for what I may have done right. That's important.
And even though he cheated on me, you do have to take responsibility for the fact that it takes two. And I'm not perfect. And I that. And, his big things was, the kids first, here first, which at the time I'm like, dude, you're full on grown up. I get you were here first. I needed you to make the kids, but, need to be potty trained. I have to do it. But in a sense, he was right because in dealing with him, I became more fond of the kids than him.
Yeah, yeah, happens. Exactly. And I think as moms,
So.
we in there. We want to be the best mom ever. And
Yeah, I with it. Do, but I really identified with it when they were younger because tonight there we were on the road, we were at pageants, we were at dance, we were at drum lessons, looked like a
yeah,
garbage can sometimes because we'd eat on the road.
yeah. And it's that phase of a woman's life, though, and even a man's life, because there's hockey, the sports, the whatever, and it goes both ways, either way, man or woman. It's so great time of life.
It is.
To really enjoy them and see them as little people. It really is. And then sometimes grief comes through there and whacks you. But a time in your life, I often like to visit back and go, oh, I remember those road trips and I remember all that
Oh
type of
yeah.
stuff. So,
What? I think grief stays with you in some form throughout your life.
mhm,
Because even though it might lessen a little bit, if you sit down and go backwards, which I don't always like to do, but I do pay homage to certain people and things, there's still that part of you that's missing, that can remember the pain. And I think that's remembering what you had and lost at some point.
yeah, so true. Very true. So, what do you do now? Like, if was looking to work with you, what do you do now? What services do you offer?
Several services. I do spiritual counseling with people. and helping them understand their power in terms of being able to connect to the universe, maybe getting messages, working with their guides, whatever it is they need to. But I also have a healing service. And what I help you do is I help you find and release old traumas that are stuck in your body.
Mhm.
And people don't understand that trauma, it can be many, many things. It can be a bully when you're 5. It can be an abusive parent. It could be just one phrase your parent says to you and it sticks. It can be ancestral. So it can come from generations. And what we do is we work with it by either going into a meditation or a hypnosis, and you carry everything with you. You've ever said or done is in your body someplace, and we find it and I help you release it. And that can be many ways. That can be through tears, that can be through anger and hitting a pillow, that can be through screaming. But about just talking about it. You can talk about it, but you have to physically
Feel.
release it. So
Yeah.
I've some stuff. One client literally throw up black tar.
Mhm.
um, so there's many, many, but in her instance, we went back. She was 55 years old. This was like 2 years ago, and found out her trauma of feeling unloved and unwanted started when she was 18 months old. When her mother helped her mother carry in the groceries, and her mother handed her like a soup can, and she dropped it, and her mother called her stupid. One word, boom. Well, if your mother thinks you're stupid, who else is going to love you?
And it's known that because a lot of times people will say, "How can you remember something back then?" or "How can you?" And it's like if it's traumatic, it's retained, and
Mm,
that's a
it
survival
sticks.
technique. And I learned just interviewing people where they're in and realized in my own life, if it's traumatic, it will be retained because it's survival. So
It is.
years ago, something came to eat your child, you don't go near that bear. So it's a survival technique that is remembered in my brain. Don't go near there. If my gut feels something and I'm walking in the woods, turn around and go the other way. So as we are born and as we move forward in life, these traumatic events are imprinted. And then that imprint is left there. And you can't figure out why you have this certain odd behavior you might be doing. And then when you start to research it and go back, you go, oh, I totally get why I have
Oh,
it now, right? And it may have happened back in grade school or before you enter kindergarten. And then all of a sudden you've carried that with you your whole life. And it just shows you how fragile we are and how great we are that we can really just regenerate and keep moving and keep going and
oh,
doing stuff. But it's scary. It's when you think about wanting to live that happy life, wanting to get through this pain and be able to wake up in the morning and feel good about who you are and where you're going. So,
absolutely. Absolutely. Have things pop up. As much work as I've done for all these years,
yeah.
had an argument with my dad about a year and a half ago. And it's a trigger for me, triggers and traumas and limiting beliefs coming up. But that was a trigger, and I heard them arguing, and I went into another room because I'm like, I'm not getting into this, that's them. But it's like, oh my gosh, this is why I left home at 17, because of this. I mean, it was there, it came back,
Yeah.
years later, 45 years later.
Yeah. And that's that forgiveness comes in because you're like, yeah, I should have
Like,
known better than pick a
I
man
know.
like this. And like,
Exactly. About running to the mirror and doing your
yeah,
mirror work.
it's our offering to everybody 50% off a 6-week healing package, which
I
is
am.
so everybody just when you visit her website or Facebook or LinkedIn, we're going to put them all in the up with it. And if you mentioned Grief Uprooted, so I love that. So you heard this episode and you get 50% off the 6-week healing package. Your website, tell everybody your website for me.
Myself. I've gotten to the point where I myself enough, so I wouldn't have, but everything is under my name, Nicole Harvick. So my website is NicoleHarvick.com. All my social media is Nicole Harvick. So if you just type in my name, you'll find something.
Oh, perfect. That's great. Well, I can't thank you enough. I really can't because I think that everybody finds healing and grief in their own way. It's just
Yes,
as
it's a unique
personalized.
path.
Yeah, it's as unique and personalized as your grief story. And so I'm hoping that out there, that you found some healing in this episode. If you have a friend or a family you think would value from listening to this, don't hesitate to share it with them. And as usual, it is only together that we grieve and only together that we heal. Thanks so much,
Mhm.
Nicole. Grief Uprooted professional grief and empowerment coaching are not to be used as a substitute for professional advice by legal, medical, financial, business, spiritual, or other qualified professionals. All our products and services are designed for grief empowerment through learning and sharing of one's lived experiences.